Hi North Bay, this is Mrs. Powers, and I am going to read your history lesson for lesson 40 today. It's about the Vikings again, so you should listen, I think, today to lesson 39 and lesson 40, but this is going to be lesson 40, okay? So we're talking about the Vikings, their families, their homes, and their faith. All right, so listen up, and when I'm done, we'll go back and we'll read the pretest number 14, so you can get that out too if you want, and we'll fill in the answers for number 1, number 2, and number 3. Okay? All right, let's get started. As we just learned, the Vikings were at times a cruel and ruthless people. For the sake of their own survival, they stole from others and invaded new lands for nearly 3 centuries. But back home in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, they lived much like the very people they attacked. Today we'll look at Viking families, homes, and faith. In an interesting way, they remain an influence on us every day of the week. Viking families often included grandparents, aunts, and uncles, as well as mothers, fathers, and their children. When a baby was born into a Viking family, it was the father who decided if it would live or die, depending on how healthy the infant was. The Vikings had no last names to pass on to their children, but they almost always had descriptive names, like Eric the Red, for example. He had red hair. Oh, so we could say Piper the Red. Sorry, that's silly. Viking families were very self-sufficient. They made for themselves almost everything they needed, especially food and clothing. Since most clothes were made at home, they were kept simple and practical. Men wore tight woolen pants that were scratchy but warm and long-lasting. Women wore long-sleeved dresses made from softer linen. Married women wore scarves over their hair, and children wore clothes just like their parents. Everyone wore warm leather shoes to survive the cold winter weather. The Vikings also wore warm woolen tunics to fight the cold. With no buttons or zippers, the Vikings used decorative brooches to attach the tunics at the shoulder. From these brooches, it was common for a woman to hang her keys or a comb. It was like wearing the things that women today would carry in a purse. For work, most of the Vikings farmed their own land, but there were also craftsmen who specialized in making items of leather, wood, glass, bone, and antler. In fact, the Vikings carved beautiful pieces of bone and antler into ornate combs and belt buckles. Iron ore was abundant in Viking regions, so blacksmithing was a common trade. Blacksmiths made crude nails, locks, horseshoes, weapons, and tools. When the Vikings weren't hard at work, they loved to play games. At home, they played board games and chess and threw dice. Some of the Vikings must have been cheaters because dice have been found with secret weights inside them, which make the dice fall a certain way. The game of chess was picked up from the Arabs, whom the Vikings sometimes traded with. For entertainment, the Vikings held horse fights, trained dogs to do tricks, and learned to jump from one oar to the next around the outside of a Viking ship. They made ice skates from cattle bones, created riddles, juggled, and held 2-week-long feasts 3 times a year. At every occasion, there was much eating, drinking, and storytelling. Typically, a large horn of ale was passed around at feasts until everyone had drunk from it. It had to be shared this way because the drink would spill if it were set down. Viking poets were called skalds. Though there was a written language made up of runes, very straight up and down letters, very few Vikings could read or write. So skalds memorized stories and legends of Viking gods and warriors. Some of these sagas were written down in the 13th century. Many can still be read today. They are a great source of knowledge about Viking beliefs and traditions, as are rune stones, great slabs of stone carved into runes as memorials and markers. I'm using it. It's propping up my phone. Can you just get a new... Don't drink mine. Can you get a new one? Sorry. I'm using Jack's water to hold up my phone. The most common Viking home was a longhouse. These rectangular structures were long, measuring 100 feet in length. They were made of logs and thatch. Walls made of packed dirt were up to 6 feet thick just to help keep in the warmth. Whoa, 6 feet wide width walls. Ours are probably like half a foot, maybe a foot. That's pretty crazy. That's a thick wall. Remember, it was cold in these far northern lands. Inside a longhouse, you would find a fire going almost all the time in the center of things. There were no windows, just a small hole in the roof for smoke to escape. A giant iron pot or cauldron was suspended over the fire for cooking and heating water. Along the walls, the Vikings built benches for sitting and working at during the day and for sleeping on at night. The hard benches were made cozier for sleeping with layers and layers of animal skins. The only other furniture in the longhouse might be a table for food preparation. Wealthier homeowners had separate rooms in the longhouse that were used for storage, stables, drying fish, or as a bathroom. It was nice to keep these rooms separate because of the smell. The Vikings created steam baths by pouring water over fiery hot rocks. It was like having a sauna in your own home. Afterwards, they would beat themselves with bunches of twigs to improve their circulation and then run outside and roll in the cold snow. Sounds painful to me. Yes, it does. In the middle of the summer, it was common for families to move to small homes in the mountains called sheilings. The purpose of their move was to follow their cattle to better grazing grounds. This season also kept Viking families busy making milk, butter, and cheeses to store for the winter. Viking children never went to school, but instead worked with their parents, and a lot of hard work was needed around a Viking home. A child who appeared to be lazy was called a charcoal chewer. It meant that the child sat around the fire too long doing nothing. It's probably similar to our term of couch potato. One of the greatest areas of work in a Viking home was in meal preparation. Food items had to be grown, harvested, stored, and of course cooked. Everyone in the family had some part in getting food on the table. Vikings ate wild animals that they hunted, domestic animals that they raised, fish that they dried, bread that they baked, and dairy products that they made. It was hard work just to eat, which is probably why the Vikings had only 2 meals a day. Much like the ancient Greeks and Romans, the Viking placed their faith in dozens of mythological gods. They believed there were 2 families of gods, the Aesir and the Vanir. Both supposedly lived in a place called Asgard, which was joined to the earth by a rainbow bridge. In Asgard, supposedly, there lived 12 gods and 12 goddesses. The earth was thought to be flat like a pancake and surrounded by deep oceans of monsters. It was believed that beyond the oceans were the frost giants, who were enemies of the gods. Even stranger, the Vikings thought that if they died in bed, they would be taken to the enemy in a boat full of toenail clippings. That is so weird. And gross. Like the ancient Egyptians, the Vikings believed that they needed to prepare themselves for the afterlife. Wealthier people were buried in ships with everything they might need in the future: food, clothing, tools, weapons, and sometimes even their slaves. A Viking ship was either buried with its owner or set aflame and sent out to sea. The sight of flaming torches hitting the sail must have been heart-wrenching for loved ones left behind. Of great significance to the Vikings was a legendary place called Valhalla. It was like heaven to them. Viking warriors believed that if they died in battle, they went straight to Valhalla. On the back of an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, Valhalla was a great hall with 140 doors, each wide enough for 800 men to enter at once. At this great hall, men could eat, drink, and fight endlessly while being served by beautiful women. The god of greatest importance to the Vikings was Odin. He was supposed to own Valhalla. By Viking tradition, Odin was the god of kings, poets, and warriors. He was thought to be very wise and the creator of the rune alphabet. As payment for his wisdom, he supposedly lost an eye at the world tree, where Odin sacrificed himself and came back to life. The English called Odin Woden. It is from this name that we get the day Wednesday. It meant Woden's Day. Now you know why Wednesday has a silent D in it. It's from Woden's Day. Or Odin? Odin? I don't know. Interesting. Another important god to the Vikings was Thor. It is from his name that we get Thursday or Thor's Day. Thor was very popular as a big, strong god. He was supposed to have bright red hair and a quick temper, but tradition says he laughed a lot too. Thor was considered the god of the sky, and he had a magic weapon. It was a hammer. To remember and honor Thor, the Vikings made little hammer-shaped charms to carry and trade. Frey was the name of another Viking god. He was supposed to be responsible for peace, crops, cattle, and marriage. It was thought he could control the rain and the sun for the farmers. You would think that Friday was named after him, but Friday actually comes from the Viking goddess named Frigg. Frigg was supposedly the wife of Odin and the Viking goddess of love and fertility. Tuesday comes from a Norse god named Tu. It was thought to be the god of war. Though the Vikings had their gods and customs, they also had the chance to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. After several decades of interacting with the Europeans, the Vikings were exposed to the one true God. Many missionaries shared with the Vikings in the 800s and the 900s. And you know what? It made a difference. And it appears that in learning about the Lord and in losing many battles, the Vikings eventually abandoned their savage ways. The looting, the raiding, the pillaging, and the plundering finally ceased for more peaceful means of survival. The Vikings went from ruthless pirating to trading and production of commerce. Of course, some Vikings only converted to Christianity by name so they would be better accepted among the European traders, but many became sincere Christians. The Vikings remained in their Scandinavian homelands and in their new settlements across Russia and Europe. Over time, the Vikings weren't called Vikings anymore. They adopted the names of the countries in which they lived. However, every week of every month of every year, those who speak English have 4 days to remember the Vikings by: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I find it astounding that the Vikings still have that influence over us. Okay, so that's a little bit more information about the Vikings, and I bet you knew some of that. Thor, Odin, Valhalla, I know that all sounds familiar to me just from some movies that some of us enjoy, but let's look at our pretest. Okay, we're on pretest number 14. Let's look at number 1. It says, Viking women used decorative blank to fasten their clothes and carry important things like keys. So let's look down at our word bank. The answer is brooches. So you can write brooches in that blank for number 1. All right, number 2 says, a lazy Viking child was nicknamed a blank for sitting around the fire. Not a couch potato like ours, but what was it called? A charcoal chewer. Hey, you charcoal chewer, stop being lazy. So you can fill in charcoal chewer for number 2. All right, and number 3 says Thursday is named for the Viking god, which one? Thor. Thor's Day, Thursday. So number 3 is Thor. All right, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed your history lesson, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week for history.